Hey guys, this is Matthew, and we're going to be recording a quick tutorial for lesson 2. Just similar to the last one, I'm going to be following along with you guys in the textbook so that you can have some step-by-step instructions. This is a really fun tutorial, so go ahead and open up. Essentially, like I think having the book available to look at is useful, but I think I had mentioned this before in the previous video that I happen to have a larger screen in front of me, so just kind of make do however you can, all right? Okay. So let's see, strategy for retouching. It's basically talking about working methodically when you're adjusting. And I just kind of want to dive into this. But let's see, I think there was a location where you're actually opening the file. Let me see if I can find that for you guys. First, it talks about resolution. There's actually a good article that I've given you guys about resolution, but the big thing I really talk about in class is that you really need to know that 72 DPI, which stands for dots per square inch, is screen resolution and web resolution. So in other words, if you're working in Photoshop to adjust images to put up on a website, you want them to be 72 PPI or DPI. PPI stands for pixels per square inch. DPI stands for dots per square inch. And it really kind of it differentiates because obviously if we're putting something up on the web, everything on a screen is rendered with pixels, or and that's why photographs and Photoshop is really good, and JPEGs in particular. Those sorts of files are really well suited for online. DPI stands for dots per square inch. And so, for example, if we're exporting something that we would like to print in the classroom on the Epson printer, usually I request students to export their document or file at 300 DPI or dots per square inch. And so there's also a thing where you need to understand the ratio as far as dots, like within a 1 inch sort of like area, that's how we're measuring the resolution or the quality of the document or image that we're working with. And so for additional clarity on that, I would like to point you guys to the article that I've arranged for you to read, okay? Let's talk about Bridge for a second. So Bridge is a real fantastic application. It essentially is a browsing application. And I like it because if you're, for example, doing a photo project or you've done a photo shoot and you're trying to analyze those photographs and you're trying to figure out which ones are in focus or which ones, the client doesn't have their eyes closed or which image is most in focus because you want to choose the one that has like the sharp quality or the one that's really focusing on the subject or I guess if you're doing like a commercial photography, maybe you're photographing an object and it's really important that those things are in very, very sharp focus. You can adjust, sharpness of an image to a certain extent, but in my opinion, you guys, nothing beats an original negative that really actually doesn't require a lot of image editing. But obviously, sometimes, you need to do that business. So I really like this chapter or this lesson because it kind of walks through some really cool tools that I think you guys are going to enjoy. So you're welcome to use Adobe Bridge to open up these documents that are provided to you, but the real truth is you're always welcome to just simply open them up directly in Photoshop. And the real truth is, I don't think everyone has Bridge loaded on their computer, so I'm not going to be firing up these images through Bridge, but I just kind of wanted to take an opportunity to tell you guys that it is a really great application that I feel like is oftentimes unsung. It feels like one of those things that a lot of designers seem to not use so much, and oftentimes it's not even installed on a computer. If you're subscription based, I believe that you should have the ability to actually download any Adobe applications you want, but I'm not sure exactly what's happening on your end. Maybe you are just using Photoshop for this class, and that's totally fine, okay? So here's the lesson two tutorial. And I wanted to mention this also, you guys, on my end, I literally have a PSD, like the book gives you an end PSD file. But the real truth is I'm not giving you guys that end file because I want you to walk through the fire, so to speak, and get the work done and then export things properly for me and upload them. And so I think the end file can be useful just as reference, but the real truth is you don't need it. So here's the start file. Go back. I want to make sure I'm in the right place. So here's lesson two tutorial, the start file. The first thing to notice is that the file type is it's a TIFF file. And so it's a higher quality raster based image, and it looks like it's probably been scanned. In fact, if you look over here, it's 14 megabytes, which is actually pretty heavy, if you ask me. Like typically a JPEG is going to be like maybe two, three, 4 or 5 megabytes, but this TIFF file, it's much more dense. So if you just say open with, like on my Mac, like I could actually open up this TIFF file with preview, but that's not going to do me any good because I can't make any edits. So I'm going to hit Command W on my computer. And again, I want to remind folks that I'm on a Mac, not a PC. And so just kind of like swap out Command for Control if you're using a Windows or a PC device. Okay, so I'm going to try that one more time. And I have right click enabled also on my machine, so you might have to do that. So right click, open with, and then I'm going to come down here and open up this TIFF document and Photoshop. Okay. So immediately it opens up in Photoshop. Yay, looks good. And I am going to be following the textbook really closely for you all. So um, the other thing that I think is really nifty is that it's showing you how to reset default settings in Photoshop. And just, I didn't do that when I opened up this image, but all you have to do is hit Command, like before you even open up Photoshop, hold the buttons down, Command, Option, and Shift, hold it down, and then launch the Photoshop application. Once you do that, you'll get a message that basically asks, and they're talking about it right now. They say, when prompted, click yes to confirm that you would like to delete the previous setting file. And so that'll get you back to square one, even more intensely, because you guys know that you can come up here on the right-hand side and select Reset Essentials, which is really valuable as well. But this is a step even further to totally reset Photoshop to factory settings. Very, very handy on occasion. Okay. Okay, so now it's asking us to open some things up in Bridge. But like I said, I just kind of wanted to chat with you guys about the interface and that sort of thing. And you can kind of see what it looks like. I want to add one other thing. The other great thing, the other fantastic thing about Bridge is that it's just more visual. And I think that in general, artists and designers are visual creatures. And so instead of looking at a Finder window with a bunch of um, various files that are associated with a project, Bridge will actually render those files for you so that you can see them. Okay. So that's the other handy thing about Bridge. Okay, so now it says if you're in Bridge, double click the start thumbnail to open up Photoshop, yada, yada, yada. And I love this. The first thing it does ask for us to do is it says, okay, we have a TIFF file, but the first thing we need to do is we need to convert this into a Photoshop document. So it says, come on over here to File, Save As. Once we've clicked Save As, the dialog box is going to pop up, and you can see it says TIF up here. We actually don't want to save this as another TIFF file. We want to change it to a Photoshop file. So with this drop down right here, you come on over here on my screen, Photoshop is at the tip top. So Photoshop, and then notice how the end file acronym changes to PSD for Photoshop document. And then we're going to save it, or excuse me, save it in the exact same location. So I think I talked about this in the last video, but you really need to be focused on project management, or in this circumstance, lesson management. So I hope everyone at this point has a course folder, and within that course folder, you already have one file folder, probably called lesson one, because that was the last one that we did. And now we're going to be doing lesson two. As mentioned, when you guys are on Canvas, there should be a link for the lesson files, and then it'll take you to my Google Drive, where and I think the interface looks a little bit differently dependent on the browser that you're using. So, but sometimes I feel like the user experience for locating the download arrow could be a little bit better, but essentially you need to download the zip file that has the lesson files inside. I should say this, the lesson folder that has the lesson files inside of it. Drag that into a course location on your computer, and that way you can kind of have everything organized. I think sometimes my students might think, I know, Professor Bollinger, you've said this quite a bit, and I'm always trying to bring it home over and over and over again, because otherwise what happens when I sit down with students when I'm teaching in person is they'll have files in their desktop area, they'll have files in their documents area, their downloads area, maybe on an external USB drive. So there are basically project or lesson files all over the place, and it just doesn't seem very organized. Okay, so I focus on that a lot in all of my design classes. Please be organized. Okay. So I think I've stood on my high horse long enough talking about that, and now let's go ahead and get started. But the other wonderful thing that it's suggesting is that you rename the file to working. And I think the last time I was recording a video for you guys, I suggested that you name it dash edit. And so the book is suggesting that you name it working, but for some reason I like dash edit. And so I'll leave it up to you guys. But what that does is it just kind of creates a new sort of separate, we're trying to create a new separate file to work with, because we don't want to destroy the original. That's so, so important in design. You never want to destroy the original negative or alter it. You kind of want to back up just in case. So I'm going to go ahead and click save because it's a Photoshop document. I've added dash edit, and it's also going to a very specific location so I can find it later, okay? Okay, so let's just keep on going. Straightening and cropping in Photoshop. This is really important stuff. And if I hit C on my keyboard, what will happen is automatically, of course, the crop tool will get highlighted on the left-hand side. And because I left my cursor over the crop tool, it's showing me what the shortcut is, which is just simply the letter C. And then when I hit the letter C, this dialog where these parameters kind of like changed a little bit up top. And there's this drop down over here. And I'll be perfectly honest, guys. Usually I ask folks to always, or for the most part, to crop images in the ratio mode, but the book is actually asking us to crop in width, height, and resolution mode. And so because I want to stay true to this textbook, which I think is actually doing a really good job as far as a crash course in Photoshop image editing, let's go ahead and stay the course. Why would I usually want to just do the ratio mode? Well, because again, I'm always trying to keep, for example, let's say you are working on a photograph, but eventually you want it to be saved for the web, which would mean that you would have to export or save another version out of the primary Photoshop document file. To me, the primary or alpha photo image document file should always be maximum, maximum, maximum quality. And then as you need things for other purposes down the road, that's when you export for a particular purpose. So for example, a particular purpose would be exporting for the web, in which case I would export it at 72 dpi, as I had mentioned earlier in the video, because that's web resolution, that's screen resolution. But if I'm going to print something on an Epson printer, 72 DPI is not pro, it's not professional quality, and it's not going to look as best as it can. And so typically, this is another magic number. 300 DPI is considered professional quality when you're printing on a nice Epson machine. Okay. So, but let's follow the book and go with height and resolution. All right. The other thing that it's suggesting is it's giving us a lot of just, parameters or information that we can plug in. So it wants us to crop a simple box that is 7 inches by 7 inches, and it's 200 pixels as far as the resolution. So 200 pixels per square inch um, is what we'll plug in here. And so I've already got 7 inches here, 7 inches there, and then 200 pixels per square inch up here. I want to warn you guys. Sometimes if you just type in 7, it'll want to, instead of having the IN for inches, it'll plug in PX for pixels. And just, forewarning to you guys, 7 inches is very, very different from 7 pixels. Okay. So make sure that it says 7IN, not 7PX. 7PX is not much. Okay. Um, so we have that plugged in. The next thing, I love this function in Photoshop where you can straighten a photograph, and that button is right here. And I just kind of want to make sure. Sometimes I get ahead of myself on the right-hand side, and I forget to scroll the textbook. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So it says first you're going to straighten the image, yada yada yada. Click the icon up top, and by the way, that's on my computer, and it should look pretty much the same for you guys. Straighten is right here, okay, up at the top. Um, and then really after you click the icon, it's as simple as sometimes I like to zoom in a little bit, but I like to see the left-hand side and the right-hand side visually on my screen because you're going to be dragging from one side to the next. So simply click and then drag. And then when you've pretty much got things situated, simply let go. So now it has been straightened. And so this is really useful. For example, I don't know about you guys, but I've been scanning family photographs. And if you're just loading up like 3, 4, 5 images on a scanner, and then you're going to crop them later with Photoshop, obviously you're going to have to straighten those images. And so you're going to have to use the straighten tool. Okay. Um, then the book suggests that you get rid of the white margin. I actually like the white margin, especially because this is just an old photograph. And what I love about the old photographs, just to kind of take you guys on a tangent for a moment, but you can see that even like it shows the year on the left-hand side, which I think is really nifty. So this is from 1971, an image. But again, I'm trying to follow the book and it says get rid of the white border. So we're going to just kind of bring these in and not too far. Of course, we want to maintain as much meat as possible from the original image. All right. So I'm just kind of like very carefully just kind of bringing these guys in. I think this is interesting too. You can see that, although there's quite a bit of white margin over here, I guess the way it was printed, maybe it wasn't an absolute perfect square, but the cool thing about digital technology is now it will be an absolute perfect square. So I think I've got things situated, and when I'm ready, up here at the top, there's this checkbox, and when you're ready to commit to the crop and the way that you've straightened the photograph, click the checkbox. I want to remind you guys, we were talking about zoom last lesson, but you can zoom out with command negative, you can zoom in with command positive, and then you can also see the entire photograph on the way that, on your screen or like in your Photoshop interface. All you have to do is hit command 0 and everything will be as large as it can be. The next thing I want to do is I want to hit Command S. And I do advise that kind of folks hit Command S or Control S, which is save occasionally, because I think I don't really experience a lot of Adobe applications crashing or doing anything too weird all that often, but it does happen. And so I'm not trying to make you guys paranoid. I'm just trying to make you good practitioners. Okay. So go ahead and save it after you've done the crop. All right. Here's something else that's kind of cool. Um, yeah, I hit Command R to bring the ruler up, and notice how it's showing us the pixel dimensions. Okay. So, but remember, we can right click that ruler and we can go to inches. So now it's showing 0 to 7 on the top and 0 to 7 on the left hand side. So it is indeed 7 by 7 inches. Okay. And if we want some additional information about image size, I don't think the textbook talks about this, at least not in this chapter yet. But if you come over here to image and then go to image size, this dialog box will pop up and it'll tell you literally how big the file document is. And right now it's 5.6 megs. Remember the TIFF file was 14 megs. And so we've made this into a Photoshop document file that is now 5.6 megs. It's also 1400 pixels as far as the width and the height. It's 7 by 7 inches and it's currently 200 pixels per square inch. And so we're getting a lot of information there. Okay. Yeah. So we can cancel out of that because that's what we wanted. Okay, so we've gone ahead and we've cropped that image. We've taken care of that step. Let's see what's next for us. It's kind of like here talking about what I was just discussing, but I do want to remind you guys that you can, if you have secondary click enabled on your computer, you can right click the ruler, which you can toggle on and off with Command or Control R, and you can say, I want to see pixels or I want to see inches. Look at all these other options, picas, points, millimeters, centimeters. I mean, obviously pixels and inches, I think, are the primary increments that you'll be working with as a designer. Picas comes up when you start doing more publications business, okay? Um, okay, so let's just kind of scroll through, yada, yada, yada. And then, of course, here it says save your work because we are rational designers and that's what we do. Adjusting the color and tone. We talked about non-destructive adjustment layers in the last lesson, and we're going to continue to build upon that. One thing I like about the whole adjustment layers thing is that you can take two separate routes to add an adjustment layer in Photoshop. So up here at the top, you can see it says properties right now. And of course, it's giving us a lot of that same information. So it says 7 by 7 inches. This is an RGB document, so red, green, blue color space, 8 bits per channel, blah, blah, blah. So a little bit of information. And if we click on the tab for adjustments, you see all these fantastic options here for you. And the first thing that it's asking us to do is to add a curves non-destructive adjustment layer. Okay, and we can do that by, these are all the options, and check that out. Here's curves right here. So if I click on that, boom, now we have the adjustment layer. Okay. And then it says select the white point tool. I typically don't call this the white point tool. I call it the white balance tool because in photography, white balance is really important as far as accurate color. And so what's it called again? White point tool. I just call it the white balance tool, but basically it's this like eyedropper thingy here on um, the to the left of the curves adjustment area. So if you click on that and then move your cursor over the photograph or image, then you're going to see it's going to convert into that like eyedropper tool looking thing. Now, it wants us to click on an area that is quote unquote true white. That's pretty much the purpose of the white point tool because that sets the color space. Like an old photograph can get a little bit yellow, or sometimes like if you're photographing a painting, you want the color to be accurate. So you put a little, like this is what I tell a lot of my painting and drawing students, you put a little just sheet of 8.5 by 11 computer printing paper on the right hand side, and you can use that to set your white balance or to use the white point tool to set your white balance. In this circumstance, we don't have that white tab, but we can make a prediction that, some of the clothes that folks are wearing is a true white. Okay. So I think like, for example, just me analyzing visually this photograph, I might use the white balance tool or point tool right here. The kid is, wearing this kind of like white dress or whatever. And so right there, like obviously where it's shaded, that's not going to work. It has to be in that space right here. So just keep in mind, it has to be basically scan the document for the widest area and use that to set your white balance. Okay. And I am going to use this area right here. I think this is the widest area in the document. I think the book advises that you use some of these ribbons on the dress, but I actually think that this is a more true white right here. So I'm going to go ahead and click think and notice how the image immediately just brightened up. Okay, folks. So that is a really, really powerful tool when you're doing image editing using the white point or white balance tool. Okay, so here it says, yeah, click on the white stripe on the girl's dress, yada, yada, yada. You guys can use this area if you'd like, or you can use the area that I chose, but it's starting to look pretty good. Definitely an improvement. Okay, so now it says we're going to use an adjustment layer, so a levels adjustment layer to refine the tonal range of the image. And essentially like what we're doing when what we're about to do, like I think this is a conversation that, again, I always have in all of my classes where I'm talking about black blacks, white whites, and a whole lot of midtones in between. And so you can tell, like, for example, if you go to the Getty or like, any kind of museum and you're looking at photography, a real good photograph is going to have a full tonal range. So dark darks, light lights, and everything in between. Sometimes the light lights don't make it to that true white, and the dark darks don't make it to that true black. And so to me, that's an issue, or you could consider it an opportunity to sort of make some adjustments in Photoshop. So I'm going to show you the other way to add an adjustment layer, which I think I did in the last lesson, but I like to come down here into the layers palette, and I will literally, there's this little half moon icon, and you can come over here and just click levels. Okay. So the levels adjustment layer is going to pop up this histogram, which is kind of like showing visually what I was just talking about, the dark darks, the midtones, and the light lights. And it's again giving us some really cool, fantastic cues. All right. So hold on one moment, please. I just want to make sure I'm telling you guys correctly. So we're looking at the histogram and we have the levels adjustment layer highlighted and selected. Okay. And it says drag the left triangle or the black point under the histogram to the right where significant shadow tones start to appear. So you can move this, excuse me, not that one, by the way, it's this guy. You can move this around and look at this. Whoa, so that basically means like everything to the left of that arrow is just going to be blacked out or washed out. So you can just literally um, underexpose this image by dragging it all the way to the left. That's obviously not what we want to do. You can also come in here and directly plug in the numbers, and I think that's kind of handy to know sometimes. So I'm just going to plug it in and hit enter on my keyboard. And I don't know if you guys noticed, it was subtle, but it basically increased the contrast of this image a little bit. So it bumped up those dark darks a hair, what we just did, okay? Okay, so now it wants us to do the same thing with the midtones, and I'm just going to type in 0.90 and then enter. And again, so now it's 15 and then 0.9, 15 and then 0.9. So we've done our due diligence and just kind of, torqued this photograph a little bit so that things are a little bit brighter. I wanted to mention the other thing as far as contrast. I feel like good contrast with full tonal range, dark darks, midtones, and light lights basically just it adds drama and clarity and legibility to a photograph. Okay. This is something that I don't I gotta be honest, guys, I don't necessarily always agree with, but because I like to keep I think one of the beautiful things about a Photoshop document file is that you can, if I were to hit save and close this out, and then later come back to it, I would be able to change my levels and my curves. But after you flatten an image, which is what this book is asking us to do next, you can't come back from that. Okay, so you can't flatten an image, save it, then close it, and then open it up the next day and expect to hit Command Z undo. Because it's not going to Command Z undo something that happened yesterday that you saved and closed out. So essentially what I'm saying is that when you flatten an image, it's forever until you start adding those adjustment layers again. But wouldn't it be really nice to be able to just save the document and then come back to it later? And if you feel like you need to make some adjustments, you can make those adjustments. So I'm not a big believer in flattening an image, but this textbook is kind of just showing you the options. And so I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to make sure Photoshop is selected, or excuse me, highlighted on my computer. And then I'm going to come over here to layer. And then on the bottom is this function, flatten image. And notice how on the right-hand side currently, we have the background image and then it says levels 1 and curves 1. And as soon as I hit flatten image, all that goes away. So now we just have a background image. Okay. Okay, so all the layers have been merged, and I think we're moving along in this tutorial just fine. The next thing I'd like to do, guys, I'm going to skip over all this stuff if you don't mind. You guys can take care of it or look at that on your own. I want to move to the spot healing brush tool, which I think is really like sometimes guys, like I'm still amazed by this software and what it does because it's kind of magical. So let's see, it says the spot healing brush tool automatically samples from the area near where you click or drag. When you want to heal using a sample of another part of the image, use the healing brush tool instead, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Um, so excellent for retouching blemishes and portraits. And obviously this is an older image and there's a lot of stuff going on here, like little specks and things like that. But let's go ahead and track down the spot healing brush. There it is. So you guys, I had another tool, the patch tool selected. And so on the left-hand side below, I'm seeing it right below the eyedropper tool. I don't know where you guys are seeing it, but select, it has that little like Band-Aid kind of icon. And then there is a drop down, but you need the one that's called Spot Healing Brush Tool, okay? In the Tools panel, select the Spot Healing Brush Tool. We've done that. In the options bar, so here at the top, all these options sort of popped up. It's basically saying set the size of the brush to 25. Mine is already there at 25 px or pixels. Okay. And then set the hardness to 100%. All right. And then also it's mentioning make sure that content aware is highlighted. There are these three separate tabs and make sure content aware is highlighted. And then this is kind of cool. All you got to do is drag. Look at this, guys. Just drag. And you don't have to do it all at once. You can kind of, as you go. Okay. And I think this is a really fantastic tool. It could also be considered wizardry. There we go. I could go in and do some other things. Like there's this little weird blemish right there. I'm gonna, just for fun, I'm gonna see if the content aware brush tool will heal this. Ooh, look at that. It did just fine. Okay. I think the other thing it's asking us to do is to heal this like little area on the top right. And it's a little bit small. So I'm gonna, of course, gonna zoom in and then I'm gonna navigate this direction. And now that we're zoomed in, we can see there's a lot of stuff, like little specks and things. Sometimes I think this adds to a photograph, so you have to be careful. If you go in and do too much of this, like maybe it'll look like you were using AI or something, or like a little bit too much technology to fix things. But if you see anything really glaring, that you consider to be a big issue? Like actually, I think I can see where I used the brush tool right here. And this, because this is a scanned image that probably was taken with an old, of course it was taken with an old camera or a film camera. There's grain associated with traditional or old photography that precedes digital. And that grain is really wonderful. And so you have to be careful not to do too much healing, if you ask me, because it just won't look believable. All right. So I'll use, you guys can use your discretion. I mean, that's what this is all like. Image editing is all about your own discretion and you're just making decisions. Okay. Okay. So we've gone ahead and corrected the rip or the issue. And then we made the correction with the top sort of like, I don't know what that is. Like it's like a white hair. I don't know what that is, but we corrected it. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the content aware patch. Kind of a cool tool for sure. This one's a little bit sort of janky, if you ask me. And so again, I think this textbook is just kind of trying to show you like the bells and whistles of the software. And so you definitely need to be aware of it. But I just kind of want to remind you guys of something I said earlier. Your best digital negative to work with is the one that doesn't really require a lot of editing. And that's why bridge is really important because you can choose the one um, that just turned out the best. And of course, sometimes you have to make some changes. And that's why we're talking about these tools. So in the tools panel, select the object selection tool, and that's this guy right here. Okay. And it says if you don't see it, click and hold, but mine was right on top. Okay, so object selection tool. And it detects subjects on a layer. So it says hover the tool over the people. So check that out. So this is the object selection tool, and the software has gotten really powerful and good, guys. Look at this. So it can kind of like, it's detecting some things going on, but I think what it wants us to do is it wants us to get rid of the figure of the boy over here. So hover the tool over the other people in the bridge, yada, yada, yada. You'll see them highlight. We did that. Hover the object selection over the boy near the right edge. When his shape highlights, click to create a selection, okay? So the only thing that didn't happen was, look at this, you guys, like it didn't detect the shadow here, okay? So it even says if the selection misses part of the subject, hold down Shift as you drag the object selection tool around any missing areas. So I'm going to hold Shift on my keyboard, and then I'm just going to sort of like, so we can try to get this other stuff. So I got the shadow on the right and the shadow on the left. Okay. In the tools panel, now it says select the patch tool hidden under the spot healing brush tool. So we got to go back to the spot healing brush, and then there's the patch tool. And by the way, I did that after like right now there's a line kind of like surrounding the boy's figure and also the shadow. And really like the patch tool now it says first of all, make sure that your parameters are the way that you want them. And it's basically saying content aware. Make sure that that's, because there's a drop down right here and you want to make sure content aware is highlighted. And also type 4 into the structure slider. So mine is already, the 4 number or increment is already there. Okay. And then really all you got to do is drag him to the left. And I think you're going to see that this is not like a perfect system. And you're also going to see that, notice how the background information isn't 100% like, I mean, I could try to line that road back there, but if I do that, then the bridge is kind of out of sync. So I don't know. I'm just going to drag directly to the left. I mean, I'm going to make a decision. I think I would prefer to do more editing um, with with the wall that's close by as opposed to the information in the back. So I'm just gonna try to align that little road. I'm gonna prioritize that for less editing in the next step. And when you're done, just let go. Now I'm relatively happy with the way that things are looking. So now I'm going to hit Command D and deselect. And you can kind of see, let's zoom in and look. I mean, I think that I mean, it's really magical what just happened, but we're going to have to go back and still do some editing to kind of fix this up, okay? So here it talks about like, like pulling that to the left, blah, blah, blah. And then it says select and then deselect. So you can come up here, select. Of course, I don't have anything selected right now, so deselect is muted. But there's also a shortcut, and that's why mine is already deselected. I went ahead and I hit Command D from muscle memory. So Command D is deselect in Photoshop. Okay. Now it says repairing areas with the clone stamp tool. I actually really like the clone stamp tool. It's something that I've used a lot. I think I like it because sometimes I'm a little bit old school and it feels like something that I can control a little bit better. And so I'm gonna come over here to Photoshop. There's the clone stamp tool right here. Click it. Looks like the shortcut is S for stamp, clone stamp. All right, and then you should see these new options up here. It's telling us to change the size of the brush to 60 and with 30% hardness. So with this drop down, we can change the hardness to 30%. And you guys can kind of like maybe toggle with those different parameters and have a little bit of fun because obviously this is just a simple lesson, so we're not trying to win any awards with this photo project, frankly, okay? But really the way that the clone stamp tool works is that you pick up pixels nearby and you literally just like stamp them and pick them up and then put them next door so that it almost kind of feels like a seamless transition. And it probably wants the brush to be a little bit larger because in order for this to be convincing, we need to pick up a large swath of pixels to the left of this figure to try to fix this little conundrum area. So, and actually, I almost kind of feel like we could, let's keep it 60. Okay, so on my keyboard, I hit Option, and when I hit Option, you can kind of see things are changing. And in order to select the pixels to the left, I hit Option and I click with my mouse. Now I have those pixels loaded in my brush, and I just move to the right and look at that. And you can even look at, I'm picking up the fence, including that like, little sort of like, I don't know, shadow. And you guys, I'm not going to spend a lot of time making this perfect, just to kind of warn y'all. So even if mine looks a little janky, please just kind of bear with me. All right. Maybe I want to get some from this side though. Look at that. I'm just kind of, I want just the texture here. Kind of picking up some of the wall and moving it around. Again, just as a reminder, with my left hand, I'm hitting Option, and then I click to select or sample the pixels, and then I move over the area where I want to move, where I want to repaste them. And this is already occurring once, so from my experience, you almost kind of want to grab some pixels that have less sort of identity associated with them, if that makes sense. So this gets like now I'm feeling like the brush is a little bit too large, if you ask me, but I do want to get this line for whatever reason. So I'm going to try to do this, guys. Ready? This is an old wall, so even if it doesn't look perfect, I think, it's better than the way that it was. And you guys, the real truth is I'm not going to go through and do all this. I could easily spend an hour or 2 hours like really nitpicking over all this stuff. Um, but I do want to show you how to use the brush tool, maybe with a smaller brush. So 60 maybe is a little bit too large right now. So let's go down to 20. And then I'm going to zoom in because I just want to select some pixels right here and just cover that up and just kind of like heal that a little bit, you know. So, you know, you might have to change the size of the brush occasionally, okay? And it's already looking a little bit better, you know. It looks one way, it maybe looks a little bit kind of rough when you're really up close to the pixels, but when you hit Command 0 and back out and see the image, it definitely it can improve, okay? Okay, so that's the clone stamp tool. And again, I'm not going to go through and do all this, but I think you guys should maybe experiment with like using the clone stamp tools at different scales so that you can go in and do some healing here. And I'll leave that up to you. But I think for the purpose of this tutorial video, um, making this go on for an extra hour is not advantageous. All right. So scrolling down, it's still kind of like, you know, giving you some tips on using the clone stamp tool, blah, blah, blah. This is how theirs turned out. Not bad, but it's a little bit, if you ask me, it's a little bit funny, you know, like, because I'm not sure if these blocks would be reading not like that. Just with my architecture experience, I know that myself, but it is convincing, you know, for the non-architecture folks. Uh, okay, so sharpening an image, let's try to do that one, okay? Here it says zoom in to the boy's shirt, and it probably wants us to do that so we can kind of see the result a little bit more clearly. Okay, so here it says choose filter, and it says choose noise, and then it says choose dust and scratches, and then this dialog box will pop up and leave it at the default setting, which is radius of 1 and threshold of 0, and hit OK. All right. Here's that dialog box that I was just looking at. And maybe some of those specs even disappeared up here a little bit. Possibly, I don't know. Actually, I think that the healing brush really did amazing work by clearing out a lot of this business. So I think these dark areas, I would definitely, if this were my photograph, I would correct that stuff. But I would, again, be careful because sometimes if you do too much correction, it can look like AI was managing things a little bit too much. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to choose filter, then sharpen, and then smart sharpen. Okay, so filter, sharpen, smart sharpen. And it says make sure that preview is available so that you can actually see it real time doing its thing. Make sure lens blur is chosen in the remove menu. Okay, and that's already there in this drop down lens blur. Okay. And then go ahead and hit OK. So just kind of sharpened things up a little bit. Sometimes it's less noticeable to the eye, frankly, but again, you know, this is a tutorial video. And it's really just kind of showing you, you know, it's how powerful Photoshop is and what it can possibly do for you. Okay. Let's see. The next one is you can choose to remove lens blur, Gaussian blur, motion blur, blah, 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 drag the slider. So you can kind of play with those different effects. All right, I think you guys got this. We're reaching the end of the lesson tutorial, but I thought this was pretty handy, this little extra credit opportunity. It says basically there's an image of a bike um, in the lesson plan. Let's see if I can try. I think I closed out my Finder window, so I'll have to cruise there again. One moment, guys. So teaching, books. There it is. Bike.tiff, right click, open with Photoshop. And essentially what it wants us to do, it says open, we've got the bike open. It wants us to create a non-destructive adjustment layer, and we're going to make the bike black and white. So I'm going to do it down here. I like the half moon approach. Click this. There's the black and white option. I really actually just kind of like speaking a little bit more freely. I think auto does quite a bit when you're doing this sort of thing. So you can click auto and it'll automatically sort of adjust some of those contrast parameters. And if you're working quickly, that's really handy. Okay. I think the other thing that's really awesome that it's mentioning is that you can colorize the entire photo. So if you click tint right here, then you can double click, and then it's saying the RGB, so red, green, blue should be, one moment, folks. So 227, 209, and 198. Then we're gonna hit OK. So we just added a little bit of kind of like old school vintage charm tint to this black and white photograph. Okay. If you want to, you can don't hit just save because this is a TIFF file. If you want to save this as a PSD, you have to go to File. Remember what we learned earlier, Save As. And then we can even call this dash working or edit. And then we need to go to this drop down and make it a Photoshop file. And now we have that preserved. So if we need it down the road. I think this was a really valuable lesson, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you guys on the other side. Bye.